everyone. In Module 2, we will start to cover the cardiovascular system. But before we dive in, let's give a little background. So let's start by saying that the circulatory system is divided into two organ systems, and these are the cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system. The cardiovascular system is going to be composed of the blood, which is what we're going to cover in this module specifically, the heart, and the blood vessels. And the lymphatic system will consist of, among several other structures, the lymphatic vessels, which will return the tissue fluid back to the blood. Make sure not to get the circulatory system confused with one of the organ systems. It is not part of the 11 organ systems, but it is a term that is commonly used to talk about things that circulate in our body, like the blood, for example, which is our first topic within the cardiovascular organ system. Let's begin our study of the circulatory system by examining, like I said, the blood, which is the transport medium for carrying nutrients, in addition to signaling molecules, respiratory gases, and waste products to and from our body tissues. Now, blood is what we like to refer to as the river of life because it's transporting nearly everything that must be carried from one place to another in the body. In fact, for thousands of years, the blood was considered magical because when it drained from the body, life departed as well. And today, blood still retains an important role in clinical medicine. Blood carries molecular evidence of the body's activities, and examination of blood is really essential in clinical assessment, as blood tests are used to screen for evidence of disease, for example, recreational substance use, and even nutritional status. So let's get started with Module 2, Learning Outcome 1, where we will cover specifically whole blood. Blood is this specialized fluid connective tissue that distributes, like we said in the previous slide, nutrients, oxygens, and even hormones to each of the roughly 75 trillion cells in the human body. Now, it also carries metabolic waste products to the kidneys. And what will the kidneys do with this waste product? Well, it will excrete it. It will eliminate it from the body through the urine. And lastly, it will also transport these immune cells that are specialized cells that will defend peripheral tissue from infection and disease. And in this way, it will be protecting our body from foreign pathogens. And these are just some of the general functions of the blood. Now, the functions that are performed by the blood are going to be absolutely essential. Any body cell or tissue that is completely deprived of circulation may die in a matter of minutes. And this is actually why when an individual has a heart attack, if they don't get treated right away, they will die because their cardiomyocytes, which are the cells in the heart, they will die from deprivation. Like I said, blood is this fluid connective tissue that is normally confined to the circulatory system, and it does have characteristics and unique composition. And it is made up of two components, which are the plasma and what we call formed elements. Let's talk about the plasma first. It is the liquid that's part of the blood, therefore the liquid matrix, and this is why it is characterized as the fluid connective tissue. Its density is only slightly greater than that of water, and it will also contain dissolved proteins rather than that network of insoluble fibers that are found in loose connective tissues or cartilage, for example. And it will also contain numerous dissolved solutes. With regards to the formed elements, they're made up of the actual blood cells and cell fragments that are going to be suspended in the plasma. And all these elements are present in great abundance, and they're going to be highly specialized. Just to mention a generalized function of these cells and fragments, we can say that the red blood cells, for example, will transport oxygen and carbon dioxide. White blood cells are components of the immune system, and platelets are small membrane enclosed packets of cytoplasm that will contain enzymes and other factors that are going to be essential for blood clotting and which will be very important to prevent excessive bleeding. When we combine plasma and formed elements, we have what we call whole blood. On this image here, we have an example of each of the cell types. This one over here is the red blood cell. The other one that's almost the same size will be the white blood cell, and the smaller one is a platelet. The image below is representing what happens when a blood sample is collected and processed. It is important that it is centrifuged so that you can analyze the parts of the blood separately. And this is exactly what we see on this image. The test tube on top contains whole blood, and this means that all the components will be mixed up. To be able to analyze the different components of whole blood, it will need to be centrifuge. This basically means that you're spinning the test tube in a centrifuge, which is a machine that's similar to, for example, a clothes washing machine. After the clothes have been cleaned and there is water in the machine, it will spin to remove the water, right? And if you don't have a lot of clothes in there, then the clothes sometimes they actually cling to the side, and this is due to the centrifuge power of the machine. Therefore, it is a similar concept here, where whole blood is going to be centrifuged and everything that is heavy will fall to the bottom. And the lighter components of blood, they will flow to the top. Therefore, on the test tube below, after it has been centrifuged, you will be able to see 3 different layers. The one on top is plasma, so this means that it is the lightest of them all, as its density is going to be similar to water. The one in the middle is what we call a buffy coat, and this middle layer will contain the white blood cells and the platelets as well. And as you can see, this middle layer will only represent about 4 to 5% of whole blood volume. Now the deepest layer will be made up entirely of red blood cells, and because, like the name says, the red blood cells are red, then the last layer will be red. So let's look at some of the characteristics of whole blood in the next slide. Whole blood, like I said on the previous slide, is going to be a mixture of plasma and formed elements. And when these components circulate through our body, they're going to be mixed up in the blood vessels. However, for clinical purposes, they are usually separated, or what we call fractionated. Whole blood is actually very sticky, very cohesive, which is another word that means that something is sticking together, and is also resistant to flow. And these characteristics will actually determine the viscosity of a solution. In this case, the solution is the blood. So solutions are usually compared to pure water. Therefore, we can say that the viscosity of water is 1. We did say on the previous slide that plasma had a slight higher viscosity when compared to water, and it is 1.5. You would think that putting together 2 solutions with similar viscosity, that the overall product would have a similar viscosity, correct? Well, this is not the case for blood. The viscosity of whole blood is actually 5, therefore more than 3 times the viscosity of plasma alone. And this is because the interactions between the water molecules and the formed elements is what raises the viscosity from around 1 or 1.5 all the way up to 5. With regards to the pH, the blood has an alkaline pH that fluctuates between 7.35 to 7.45, and a temperature that is going to be slightly higher than the core body temperature. So our core body temperature sits around 37 degrees Celsius, and the blood temperature sits around 38 degrees Celsius. If you prefer to use Fahrenheit, then the core body temperature is around 98.6 Fahrenheit, and the blood temperature would be 100.4 Fahrenheit. With regards to blood volume, on average, adult males, they will have 5 to 6 liters of blood circulating in their bodies, and adult females will have about 4.5 liters. This difference is just because on average men are bigger than women, so they will have more blood circulating in their bodies. Now, clinicians will use the following terms to refer to low, normal, or excessive blood volumes. So, hypovolemic for low blood volume, which makes sense because hypo is low or inferior. Normal volemic for normal blood volume, and therefore within the range that we just talked about, 5 to 6 liters for adult males and 4 to 5 liters for adult females. And the next is the hypervolemic for excessive blood volume, as hyper means increase. Now, low and high blood volumes are potentially dangerous. For example, a hypervolemic condition such as hypertension or high blood pressure can place a severe stress on the heart, which must push the extra fluid around the blood vessels. So it's important to maintain a normal blood volume. Let's talk specifically about the plasma now. So plasma will contribute approximately 55% of the volume of whole blood, and water accounts for 92% of the plasma volume. So there are average values, and the actual concentration is very depending on the region of the cardiovascular system or the area the body sampled and the ongoing activity within that particular region. So these factors are important to keep in mind when taking a blood sample. What's in the plasma? Mainly it will contain water, proteins, and other solutes. With regards to water, it will be important to transport organic and inorganic molecules in addition to the formed elements. With regards to proteins, we have a few proteins listed here. We have albumin, globulins, fibrinogen, and regulatory proteins. Here is the breakdown of some of the important factors of these proteins. Albumin will represent 60% of the plasma volume. It will be the major contributor to the osmotic pressure of plasma, and in addition, it will help with the transport of lipids and steroid hormones, and it is the smallest of the major plasma proteins. Next, we have globulins, which represent 35% of the plasma volume. There are two types of globulins. We have what we call immunoglobulins, which can also be called antibodies, and the transport globulins. The immunoglobulins, they will be an important component of the immune system, as they will serve to attack foreign proteins and pathogens. And on the other hand, the transport proteins, they will bind small ions, hormones, or compounds that are either insoluble or that might be filtered out of the blood at the kidneys. Next, fibrinogen will represent 4% of the plasma volume. It is the largest of the plasma proteins, and it is an essential component of the clotting system. Therefore, under certain conditions, fibrinogen molecules, they will interact, forming these large insoluble strands of fibrin. And these fibers, they will provide the basic framework for the formation of a blood clot. And if the steps are not taken to prevent clotting, then the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin will occur in a sample of plasma. Now, this conversion will remove then the clotting proteins, leaving the fluid known as a serum, which can be converted to insoluble fibrin. produced in response to bleeding and is the major component of blood clot formation. So the way that we can maintain the blood that's removed from our body from clotting is by preventing fibrinogen from converting into fibrin and forming these insoluble strands. And last, we have what we call the regulatory proteins, and these will represent less than 1% of the components of plasma. And these are going to be the enzymes, proenzymes, and hormones. Proenzymes is just telling us that it will refer to the inactive substance which will eventually be metabolized into an enzyme. Now both albumin and globulins, they are able to attach to lipids that are not water soluble, such as triglycerides, fatty acids, or cholesterol. And these protein lipid combinations that are called lipoproteins make sense, right? So they're attaching lipids to proteins, lipoproteins. They're going to be readily dissolved in plasma, and this is how insoluble lipids are able to be delivered to the peripheral tissues. Then we have the other solutes, and in this category we have electrolytes, organic nutrients, and organic wastes. Electrolytes are important because having a normal extracellular fluid ion composition is essential for vital cellular activities, especially since ions, they will contribute to osmotic pressure of body fluids. And the major plasma electrolytes are going to be, for example, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, even bicarbonate ions, and a few more like hydrogen phosphate and sulfate. And these electrolytes will also help to maintain a normal pH level. Next, we have organic nutrients, and these will be your lipids, which include your fatty acids, cholesterol, and glycerides, and your carbohydrates, which primarily is glucose, and also amino acids. And last, we have what we call organic wastes, and these are going to be carried to the sites of breakdown and excretion to be able to be eliminated. And some of the examples include urea, uric acid, creatinine, bilirubin, and ammonium ions. In many respects, the plasma will resemble the interstitial fluid. For example, the ion concentrations in plasma are similar to those of the interstitial fluid, but are very different from the ion concentrations in the cytoplasm, which is inside of the cell. Now, the two main differences between the plasma and interstitial fluid will involve the concentrations of dissolved gases and proteins. So when talking about the difference in concentration of dissolved gases, let's use, for example, oxygen and carbon dioxide. There will be a higher concentration of oxygen in plasma and a higher concentration of carbon dioxide in interstitial fluid. And as a result of this, oxygen will diffuse out of the bloodstream and into the peripheral tissues, because it will go from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration by diffusion. And this means that the opposite will occur to carbon dioxide. Since there is more carbon dioxide in the interstitial fluid, it will diffuse into the blood vessels where the concentration is lower. It makes sense, right? You want the oxygen that is in the blood vessels to reach the cells, and you want the waste products, in this case carbon dioxide, to be taken away from the cells into the bloodstream, where it will eventually reach the heart and then travel to the lungs to pick up more oxygen. With regards to the dissolved proteins, plasma contains significant amounts of dissolved proteins, whereas interstitial fluid does not. And this large size and globular shapes of most plasma proteins actually prevents them from crossing the capillary walls, and they will remain trapped within the cardiovascular system, so inside of the blood vessels. And this is why plasma has an overwhelming quantity of proteins compared to interstitial fluid.